I would suggest that self-inquiry is the prelude to self-abidance or self-resting. And the reason I would suggest that, if you were to meet a friend after this retreat, you go home and you meet a friend for a cup of coffee in a cafe, and you start talking with your friend, and you begin to discuss these matters, and you say to your friend is unhappy and is asking you advice, and you say to your friend, just abide in yourself. Unless your friend is familiar with these ideas already, your friend is not going to know what you mean. Why? Because he doesn't yet know his self clearly. So he doesn't know exactly what he should be abiding in. Should he be resting in the body? Or should he give his attention to his chest or his belly? Or what is the self that he should be? He won't know what you mean. So before we can abide in the self, or as the self, we need to investigate what the self is. So if you were to start asking your friend, well, who are you? If you want to be free of suffering, you need to know who you really are. Who are you? And your friend will say to you, I am the father of 2 children. And you would say, no, being the father, you have not always been a father of 2 children. What were you before you were a father of 2 children? He'd say, well, I'm a married man. And you say, no, I'm not always a married man. What were you before that? And then he'll start describing his thoughts to you. And you say, no, your thoughts are not always with you. What are you before your thoughts? And then he'll start describing his deeper layers of feeling. And you'll say to him, no, you're not always your feelings. You are helping him investigate himself. He's not abiding in himself, but he is investigating into himself. What he refers to when he says I. Before I is mixed with thoughts, feelings, activities, relationships, you are slowly taking him by the hand and walking him back through this process of investigation to his self. And at some stage, there will be this recognition in him, oh, I am just that which is aware. And then you say to him, just rest as that. So at that moment, self-inquiry turns into self-abidance. Now, when you have investigated yourself a number of times, you no longer need to go through the process. You just have the thought and you go straight to yourself. There's no more investigation. Or sometimes not even the thought, maybe the impulse, an impulse of, let's say, reactivity in a relationship. Just the impulse to react rises in you, and you just go straight back to yourself without even having to go through a verbal process or a thought process. You just go back to yourself and you stay there, you rest there, you sink into yourself. The deeper aspect of Atma Vichara, what Ramana Maharshi referred to as Atma Vichara, is self-resting or self-abidance, or sometimes called self-remembrance. But a prelude to that, for most people, is this process of investigation.
Can I please share an experience and a quote by Ramana Maharshi, and could you comment on how, whether I've chosen a relevant quote and how that applies in a practical way to your teaching? So my experience is that I read your book, Being Aware of Being Aware, and have tried to do that in a form of meditation. And my concern, I suppose, was that when I did the actual question of, I was peaceful, and then I asked the question, am I aware? There seemed to be a register that flipped on to say yes. which I guess is some sort of like a subtle object, perhaps, you've mentioned before, because I guess you can't really see awareness, but you know you are. So it just seemed to be like that. After many hours of doing this, I found I didn't really need to ask the question anymore because it was like always on.
Yeah.
So I'm concerned, is that a subtle object? Is it something that I'm seeing?
No, it's not a subtle object. You know the experience, I am.
Yes.
Can you say, I am from your experience? Yeah.
Yes.
But can you say that? Is that true of your experience?
Yes.
In other words, you know the experience I am.
Yes.
So when we say, I am, what we're really saying is, I know that I am. Because if we didn't know that I am, we wouldn't be able to assert it. But we can assert it, and this shows that we know that I am, or I know that I am. Yes? Now, is the I that I am the same I that knows that I am? Or is there one I that I am and another I that knows it? What is your experience?
Well, initially there seemed to be two.
Yes.
And in time, it's the same.
Exactly.
I don't really feel a distance.
It is, when you say, I know myself, the I and myself are the same.
Yes.
So our knowledge of ourself is, so we could say the subject of the experience, I, and the object of my experience, myself, are the same. But being the same, we can't really refer to them as subject and object, because there is no separate subject of the experience or a separate object of experience. So our knowledge of ourselves is a unique knowledge. It is the only knowledge there is that doesn't take place in subject-object relationship. All other knowledge, if you think about it, involves something being known by myself. I know my thoughts. I feel sad. I perceive the tree, etc. It's always a subject joined to an object through an act of knowing, feeling, or perceiving. But our knowledge of ourself, that is, awareness is knowledge of itself, is the only knowledge there is that doesn't take place in subject-object relationship. In other words, in the knowledge I am, the I that I am is not a subtle object. It has no objective content at all.
This is the quote that I was looking at when I was trying to find some sort of clues into this. And it's, he must first discern consciousness from insentience and be the consciousness only. Later, let him realize that insentience is not apart from consciousness. This is discrimination, viveka, if I pronounce that right.
Yes.
The initial discrimination must persist to the end. Its fruit is liberation. So I wasn't quite sure what he meant by insentience, but he seemed to be giving us a clue as to how to discern consciousness.
Yes.
And I'd like to get your take on what is viveka and what is the practical application of this quote, perhaps, in your teaching.
That's a beautiful quote. So let's just go through it sentence by sentence. Read the first sentence.
He must first discern consciousness from insentience and be the consciousness only.
Okay. So when he says he must first discern consciousness, he's making a concession to the person. He's saying that the person must first discern consciousness from insentience. So he must first discriminate that which is aware from that which he is aware of. So, for instance, a thought is not itself aware. A thought, for instance, is not listening to our conversation. A thought is not conscious or aware or sentient. Likewise, the microphone in your hand is not aware. It is not listening to our conversation. A sensation is not aware. A sensation is something that we are aware of. So what he means by the insentient is the objects of experience, anything that we are aware of, as opposed to that which is aware. So this is what he calls viveka, discrimination, discriminating between that which is aware and that which we are aware of. So that he says he must first, I'm paraphrasing now, he must first discern consciousness from that which is insentient. Is that right? And then he says, and must know himself as that. Or
yes.
Read the sentence again.
And be the conscience.
And be the conscience.
Consciousness only.
So first of all, the person thinks, I discriminate awareness from the content of awareness.
Yes.
But then that's the first discrimination. But then he must realize that he, the person, is essentially that consciousness.
Yes.
So it is no longer the person that is recognizing consciousness, because it is the consciousness that is recognizing what is itself and what is an object of its attention. The person must know himself as consciousness alone, as opposed to anything we are conscious or aware of. And this is the path of discrimination, what I call the inward-facing path. I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my feelings, I'm not my sensations, I'm not my perceptions. I am that which is aware of all of these. So we discriminate, we separate out awareness from the objects of awareness, and we recognize that that is what I essentially am. We recognize this awareness is not something that I know, like I know thoughts and things. It is what I am. I am essentially that which is aware. Mm-hmm. So that is what he means by he must know himself as that. He must be that consciousness knowingly. And this is the first discrimination, the separating out of awareness from its content. It's called viveka, or discrimination, in the Vedantic tradition. And now carry on with the next line.
The last part is, the initial discrimination must persist to the end.
Yes.
Its fruit is liberation.
That's it. So the initial discrimination is discriminating what is essential to us from what is not essential, discriminating that which is aware from that which is not aware, the insentient. And it must continue to the end. That means it must continue until we recognize clearly not only that I am awareness, but the very nature of the awareness that I am. That was the second stage of our meditation this morning. Not just discovering that I am awareness, but discovering that awareness is eternal and infinite. So the recognition of I am awareness is a partial liberation from the tyranny of experience, but it is not yet a full liberation, and it's not what is referred to as enlightenment. What is referred to as enlightenment is the recognition of the nature of the awareness that I am, namely that it is ever-present and eternal. That is what he means by persisting until the end, and persisting until we know the nature of the consciousness that we are.
So that would be, would it be true to say that is liberation from one's ego? Or?
Yes, the ego is the identification of what we essentially are, yes, awareness, with what we are not, that is thoughts, images, feelings, and perceptions. So the ego is a mixture of awareness plus the objects of experience. And this mixture, that is why the ego, or the finite mind, that is why we all feel, even a separate self feels, myself. That feeling of myself is consciousness' knowledge of itself, because only consciousness can know itself. But its knowledge of itself is mixed with or coloured with its knowledge of thoughts and feelings. And that is why, whilst everybody knows their self, Not everybody knows their self clearly, and that is why not everybody feels liberated and why most people suffer. So the discrimination is the discrimination of what we essentially are from what is superfluous to us, namely thoughts and perceptions.
In the meditation this morning, when we were experiencing the body as waves of sensation and energy pulsing, etc., and I could really feel that. Why is it though that when I open my eyes, I see a solid body, and I feel a solid body, and then following on from that, if I did that meditation on a regular basis, would I eventually not experience my body with my eyes open as a solid body? And the final part is, how do you see all these bodies? Do you see solid bodies, or do you see waves of energy and pulsing? And just curious. Thank you.
So go back to this morning's meditation. You were experiencing your body as a pulsation or a vibration, a movement of awareness or knowing. And then you opened your eyes. We'll come to the sight of your body in a minute, but the actual experience of your body, did it really change when your eyes were closed? Close your eyes now. Can you just go back in a moment to feeling your body as this borderless, amorphous, tingling vibration? Mm-hmm. Okay, so now stay with that feeling and open your eyes. Does the sensation change?
No.
No. So the feeling of the body stays the same. However, when we open our eyes, the illusion of the existence of matter outside consciousness immediately presents itself again. And all the old beliefs that the world is made out of stuff outside consciousness called matter returns, and we again superimpose that belief onto the body. So although your actual experience of the body hasn't changed, you say, I now experience my body solid, as being something solid and dense. No, your experience of your body is exactly the same as it was a minute ago with your eyes closed, but you have superimposed an idea on your body that seems to be consistent with visual perception, and you are now feeling your body in a way that conforms to your belief about it. That is the power of belief.
So does that mean if I kept practicing and not kept getting more into the experience, as you say, and not the belief and the conditioning,
yes,
that eventually
the old
I wouldn't even see.
No, not we'll come to seeing in a minute.
Okay.
Let's just stay with feeling for the moment. You would, in time, more and more, you would feel that your body was open, empty, transparent, sensitive, available, undefended, etc. You wouldn't immediately contract into this solid, dense, limited knot of tension as soon as you opened your eyes. You would find that you were able to maintain that feeling of your body while you were having lunch with friends or going for a walk or whatever it is you were doing. So in terms of perception, the experience of... Let me ask you this. Is there anything to your sight of this room other than the experience of seeing?
No.
And if you were to touch the stuff that seeing is made of, what would you find? Seeing is made out of something, yes. Seeing is not nothing. There is something. So now touch the stuff that the experience of seeing is made of. If you are experiencing seeing, you must be experiencing the stuff it is made of. You can't read an email without seeing the screen. So What is the stuff that seeing is made of? Try to give it a name. Try to answer from your own experience. Is it true of your experience that knowing is all there is? Knowing is the stuff that seeing is made of? And if not, what other stuff is it made of?
Yeah, it is my experience that all there is to seeing is a knowing of it.
Okay. And knowing is transparent, empty. It's not something solid, dense, or opaque. Yeah.
Yeah. That's where I think I struggle, because what exactly is knowing?
But knowing cannot be defined in terms of anything other than itself, because it is the primary element of experience. We can't say, if we say knowing is consciousness, it's just another way of saying knowing. It doesn't help us. There's one element of reality that can't be defined, because it is the primary element. So ultimately, we can't define knowing, but nevertheless, knowing or being aware is your experience. Yes?
Yes.
So you know in your experience what is meant by knowing or being aware.
Yes.
Yeah. And that is, it's not something solid or dense. It's not material stuff. It's substantial, but it's not material stuff. Yeah.
But there are still like outlines and shapes, rather than just...
But your only knowledge of those outlines and shapes is the knowing of them. Everything you have ever experienced is made out of the knowing of it.
Okay, yeah.
So what I'm leading towards, because you asked about seeing and the solidity of bodies, this knowing can appear solid. So I don't have magical visual powers. I can't see, just because it's clear to me that everything, that the world is ultimately made out of consciousness, and consciousness itself is transparent and empty. That understanding doesn't give me the power to see through bodies. So the answer to your question, do I see kind of pulsating? And the answer is no, I just see 180 bodies, much the same as you do. But remember, when you have a dream at night, and you imagine now that you are having a dream. I mean, after all, you could dream the scenario that you are currently experiencing. So imagine that you are now having a dream, and the dreamed meeting that you were attending would appear in the dream exactly the same as this dream. You would not, for instance, be able to see through the people in front of you. But when you wake up in the morning, you realize that all there was to the people in front of you in your dream was the activity of your own mind. And the activity of your own mind is not made out of solid, dense, opaque stuff called matter. It is transparent stuff called knowing. But even so, the characters in your dream still appeared to be opaque. So just because the characters in the waking state appear to you to be opaque, and they appear to me to be opaque too, doesn't prove or imply that they are made out of solid, dense, impermeable stuff called matter. That, I would suggest that the way all these bodies and indeed all these objects appear is just the way this transparent knowing, or the activity of this transparent knowing, appears from the perspective of a separate subject of experience. So yes, the objects appear to be solid and dense, made out of stuff called matter, but that is just their appearance from the perspective of a finite mind. The stuff that is appearing is itself transparent, just like the stuff that appears as solid objects in your dream is your own transparent mind.
That analogy with the dream is really helpful. The only thing I'm slightly still stuck on is that the last bit you just said actually is about it looks that way because it's being filtered through my mind, which is kind of what I thought. So I thought, well, when I have my eyes closed, was I sensing my body through the filter of consciousness rather than my mind? And if that's the case, why can't I do that with my eyes open? Because my mind isn't behind my...
Everything you experience through your finite mind, whether your eyes are closed or not. Okay. You close your eyes now, you are having a particular sensation, yes? None of us know what that sensation is. It's your own private sensation. It is known by your mind, your thoughts, for instance, your feelings. None of us know what they are. So all your experience is known through the agency of the finite mind, whether your eyes are open or closed. Consciousness needs the finite mind in order to experience in order to have objective experience. It must seem to locate itself as a separate subject of experience in order to experience an object. Because you can't have an object without a subject. You can't have one side of a coin.
Okay, I get it now, because sensations and pulses or whatever are still objects.
Absolutely,
yeah,
yes. When I say objects, I'm not just referring to physical objects. I mean anything with an objective limit. A thought, a feeling, a sensation, a sound, a taste. That's what I mean by objects.
Okay. Thank you.